Hi, I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix. Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold those in power to account. We tell you what matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. Now, moving to level 1 of the lockdown will see a limited return to international travel, with 3 of South Africa's international airports reopening for commercial flights. This brings with it fresh challenges to ensure safety standards are in place and adhered to, and that international travel happens within the context of the new normal. To tell us what exactly to expect and how safe air travel to other countries will be, I'm now joined by the Transport Minister, Fikile Mbalula. Minister, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me here. You visited OR Tambo International a few weeks ago. Are you planning visits to Cape Town International and to eThekwini, to King Shaka, to see whether the protocols are in place? You've got until the 1st of October.
Thank you, Karima, and listeners, thank you for having us. I've been to King Shaka. I'm left with Cape Town International Airport, and I'll be doing Cape Town International Airport this week. I was following up on complaints about airlines not complying, and I'm satisfied that airlines do comply. The problem and the challenge is with the people, the travelers, and we need to address that. And overall, I'm happy with the compliance measures at our airports undertaken by our entity AXA, working with health authorities. I'm very much happy about that, Karima.
One of the things that most travelers obviously want to know, Minister, is when they are planning on an international trip, by way of protective gears, obviously no one without a mask will be allowed to get onto an aeroplane. What are the kind of do's and don'ts for passengers, and what are you proposing as the Transport Minister to do to educate people? And often when people travel to other countries, or even just in their own countries, people often forget things. I mean, is there going to be any kind of flexibility, or is there no room for negotiation on things like masks, and personal protection that must be used?
International travel will be totally different from domestic. We are going to put more emphasis on when you apply for your visa, that will include 72 hours. Like yellow fever. When you go to any of these countries, third world countries, they want yellow fever to be part of you. In this instance, it's going to be 72 hours, among others, things which will announce a list of all other things this coming week. 72 hours testing, and the test that proved that you are negative. And coming down, when you touch down, you bring that. And also, we will undertake some measures of testing. Rules are going to be rules, and they are strict. Even now, we are strict. I mean, you don't have a mask, you don't board. All what we don't do on board, which is what people must understand, we're not doing social distancing on board the airline. Secondly, we don't do sanitizer. That's why at the airport, there is sanitizer every corner. But you sanitize before you board, and when you also disembark.
So, Minister, what
signs of symptoms of corona? We're able to handle that. Airlines are able to handle that on board.
Okay, Minister, let me just come back to the question of social distancing. I mean, I've seen pictures of international travel in business and first class where people are sitting apart from each other, where people are in hazard suits. What is it going to look like on an international flight? And when you say there's going to be no social distancing, does it mean every single seat is packed? Are people required to wear their masks for the entire time during, the flight?
International will have its own special arrangements, but we have done mitigating, we have introduced mitigation measures for addressing social distancing. Now, I've seen an article where people say that there can be transmission on air you know, and inside the airline. It's correct, there can be transmission. But we have introduced a measure. We have, ensured that all the airlines, and that is happening even globally, that airlines are capacitated with what is called high efficiency particulate, which is called HEPA on board, and that mitigates. And the HEPA, what it does is that as you are on board, it does mitigate in the sense that whatever virus that is airborne inside the aircraft, it is able to actually deal with that. So when I explain it, I say that it eats the virus, and which is what it does. We know that scientists are saying to us that COVID-19 is now airborne. It can stay on air for about 5 seconds. HEPA is able to deal with that. It's one of the mitigation we have actually introduced. It's not something that you can see, unfortunately. So all of those measures are actually introduced for airlines. Over and above that, airlines are actually, they do what is called cleaning on board and disinfection effectively. Before you embark and when you disembark, the airline is actually being disinfected, which is something that was not happening in the past, but this is happening now regularly and quite efficiently.
I've spoken to quite a few people who've traveled, and they often say that their passengers are not wearing masks and no one enforces that. What are the regulations, Minister? Are passengers meant to wear masks for the entire duration, except for when people are taking meals on planes?
No, people are supposed to put on masks. I was in an aircraft to and from Devon when I was looking at the compliance and so on. There was about 2 guys who were drunk sitting in front of me, and they were not putting on masks. And the stewardess and the people who are in charge in the aircraft were able to deal with that. So in the aircraft, I think all the measures that are introduced, if there's anyone in terms of the travelers undermining the measures, we're able to deal with that. The captains are able to deal with that. We've had incidents where people did not want to put on masks in Cape Town International Airport. Since then, there's been very minimal. It's not possible that anyone can defy the measures that we have introduced. Yes, there are elements who don't put on masks. You are expected to put on a mask for your own protection. But should you not put on a mask, you will be actually be dealt with in terms of enforcement on board.
Okay, so let's come to the list of countries, Minister. I know that it is going to be revealed later in this week, but can you just give us the categories of, that is going to be considered and how one category will differ from the next? So if we take, for example, our BRICS allies, we are in BRICS together, but 2 of the BRICS countries, Brazil and India, are both the 2nd and 3rd largest outbreaks of corona. Will people be able to travel to those countries?
What we are going to be introducing and explaining to the public in terms of regulations, as the Department of Transport working with DERCO and others, we're taking the cue from what the President has said as we must do. President said we must open up. The international flights will be open from the 1st, but cautiously. So we are going back to the period before level 5. You remember, when we categorize countries in terms of high-risk countries, which is what our teams are analyzing now scientifically, and low-risk countries, and countries that are totally not affected. So that's what we're going to be checking on. For instance, take the whole of the United States. I had your question earlier on. Probably it will be high risk, and we will then deal with it as such. and then take a UAE if it is low risk country. We will also, in terms of opening up, deal with it. So this will be opened in a phased-in approach, but differentiated.
Okay, so when we talk about differentiation, Minister, are you considering differentiating access to a particular country? If you look at the United States, it's a huge country. Some might even argue it's a continent, and you have the outbreak that differs from, state to state, city to city. Are we going to go that granular in terms of differentiation? So, for example, would you suggest, or would we have something that says you can't fly to, let's say, city A in the US because of the numbers, but you might be able to fly to city B because the numbers are lower, even though as a totality, the US has the highest numbers in the world as it stands?
International travel doesn't work like that. You can board in New York, Washington, Miami, Atlanta, LA, and connect from there, even if you come from, if Americas and United States as a whole is a risk. In our approach, even this is what we did at level 1, we treat it as such. A differentiated approach will be emphasis in terms of country to country, in a sense that Italy was a high risk, and we'll then look at where they are today. Brazil was high risk. We'll look at Brazil and then where they are today, and then we'll look at France and so on, and all the countries we connect to in Europe, Where you will have a much more better differentiated approach is Europe, because as much as you can fly to Germany, connect to Germany, and get into Europe and so on, but Germany will not be the same as another country and all of that. So Europe as a whole can be treated as one. And whereas in the United States of America, it is a different thing altogether. But this week we will announce, and our teams are working on a scientific approach, so that what we are going to announce, based on what the president has directed we must do, we are able to do it on the basis that our approach is well-informed and well-researched.
Okay, so you're saying you're going to do it on the basis of science and it's well-resourced and researched. I looked at the comments from the tourism minister in one of the major newspapers this morning. Obviously, they have certain objectives. We have economic considerations. When you are going to apply the science, is it going to be informed only by that and health, the public health concerns, or is the economic concerns of the aviation industry, of the tourism industry, of the hospitality industry, in economic terms, going to be factored in when you finally make a decision on which countries we will take visitors from and allow South Africans to fly to?
The decision to open up, it's economic, among others. And so the application and the implementation of that particular decision will be informed by research, how we do this thing. Under normal circumstances, we will be continuing to close down the borders and closing international travel. We're opening up because we want people to come slowly, to come and to start to travel for leisure and also for tourism. That's what we want to do, the African continent and the rest of the world. But what the president has directed us to do is that we must do that cautiously. Eventually, we will open up. We will open. But we can't just do it like boom, at the go, especially international travel, because you can have people moving from one city, one country to the other, with this transmission thing. Patient number 1 of coronavirus in our country came from outside the country.
Just a final question, Minister. The continent, the rest of the continent, are people allowed to fly to the rest of the continent, with the 1st of October? Is that a kind of done deal?
No, we will consider that. It's part of the package we'll look at. And of course, African continent is our priority. We're doing a lot of business as South Africa with the rest of the African continent. So we need to open up, and also our neighbors, they are dependent on South Africa's economy. And we are also having relatives and friends in the neighboring countries. So we need to open up and we start the economic movement between the two countries and also for leisure and all of that. So the rest of the continent, the region start with, and then the rest of the continent will constitute part of what we'll be looking at and also high priority.
All right, that is where we leave it. Thank you so much to the Transport Minister, Fikile Mbalula. We will, of course, keep a watching eye on that announcement later in the week. Up next, what does the South African Communist Party want from the new economic rescue package to be tabled in the coming weeks by President Cyril Ramaphosa? Stay with us.